So joining me today, I'm really delighted to introduce the absolutely amazing Michael Cody.
Oh,
Hi.
Adam, it's wonderful to be with you. It's great to see you, and thrilled to be here.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for being on the podcast. Michael, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, who I am? Well, I'm married 32 years to my high school sweetheart, and we have 7 amazing kids. I have the pleasure of serving as the chief operating officer for a multinational manufacturer of skincare and nutrition supplements named AquaSource. We're based out of the UK. I actually live in the States, in Texas, but our team is diverse all over the world. We're operating in 9 countries, and so yeah, that's kind of the day gig, and then also on top of that, I am an angel investor and invest and acquire businesses, and have worked in the business and growth development space for executive development and growing and building teams in different companies and sectors for the last 32 years.
Fantastic. And it was so exciting. We met in Spain on a business retreat, and
We did.
were fantastic executive coaches there. And it was just so wonderful to hear everything you've done. This podcast really focuses on conflict resolution. And in particular, I wanted to ask you about workplace culture and conflicts in the workspace. And I was reflecting that in your role as COO and with all the experience you've seen from other companies, you must have had quite a few challenges and built up some strategies in terms of boosting staff engagement. And I wondered if you would share some of those or some thoughts on strategies and how to transform the dynamics of a team.
No, it's a great and very interesting subject. I mean, the reality is every business works on paper, and then you add people to the mix. And so people are both irrational but predictable. So that there is that dynamic. And I made early in my career, I started my first business at 19 years old, and I made all the common mistakes one makes coming up. And one of the first mistakes I made was hiring all of my mates to come be part of my team. Because we got on so well together in school. Surely we'll be an amazing business team, right? And sadly, had to let go of a bunch of my mates, and so I lost both workers and friends. So you learn from that experience, But the truth is, as you look at it, learning how to use conflict as a healthy tool, because conflict doesn't have to be negative. The reality is that most of the models of conflict that we are exposed to, especially as children coming up, are within our family dynamics or other things like that. And often those aren't necessarily the healthiest examples of how you have productive conflict. And so what happens is we model and we start to associate that anger is a component of conflict. And it doesn't have to be. It's possible to hold 2 different positions and no anger involved whatsoever. Because a lot of times, a lot of the psychology courses and things that you learn as you come up, anger is what they refer to as an umbrella emotion. And so it's a wrapper on the outside of the box, and there's usually other things within the box which actually are driving the anger response. But the anger response is that classic fight, flight, freeze kind of dynamic where someone's in the middle of what's referred to as an amygdala hijack. And so their brain cannot differentiate between physical threat and social emotional threat. It treats them both in the same way. And so the same biochemical cocktails get dumped into your brain as if you were being chased by a bear through the woods, as if you were in a social setting where there's a conflict, work or a family dynamic or anything else. And our physicality at a biological level still reacts as if we're being chased by a bear.
Yeah,
and that doesn't.
It's so interesting because people are commonly afraid. I mean, the classic responses, as you say, there's fight or flight. People go off sick. They avoid it. They don't have the difficult conversations that they need to have. And actually, what you're describing is actually quite normal. It's a healthy part of functioning. And I think many businesses maybe we do courses on having courageous conversations and global training. I think it's so important to realize that this is all quite normal, and you can either just put your head in the sand, or you can actually address it head on.
Yeah, it's very true, Adam. I think one of the dynamics that we discover, because where a lot of conflict shows up in business, generally comes around expectation management, performance management issues, things like this, where there's an objective, there's a goal or something we've set up and established, and then for whatever reason, certain people or teams aren't performing to the level of expectation, or there's a difference between what you said, what they heard, and what they did, that somewhere between idea and execution, you get a radically different outcome. There was a major event on the weekend in my industry, and what was very interesting, it was a room full of absolute top level leaders within our industry space. These are people who are immensely successful at working with people and communicating. And they started at the very front end of the room, maybe 1,000 people in the room, at the very first person on the front row on the farthest corner. And the speaker went to them and said the word banana. That's all they said to them. And then they played the classic whispers game and had to go through the entire room to the last person, where the message ended up as, may you go with light and love. So somehow in a room of people whose whole career is communication, okay, we got from banana on the front corner to the back corner of the same room, and the message has changed. Lovely message, but completely inaccurate to what the intended outcome was at the very beginning of it. And so if that's possible with people who have made their entire career out of communication, what's the dynamic for the rest of us in a regular world situation as we're interacting with these things? So a lot of that conflict management side of things, for me, it's directly tied to the ability to communicate and connect and make sure that there's fidelity in that communication, fidelity of expectation, fidelity of measurement. Like those things are absolutely without question clear. There's a very
those things. No, sorry, I was going to say those things are subjective. Those are objective things.
Yeah.
And I wondered about some of the more subjective things, because you started by saying that your first business, you employed 11 friends.
Yeah,
I was expecting that actually, in terms of how we've grown as a business, we look at skills and talent, but we also look at where people fit on their sort of personality profile and how they see the world, and whether they're aligned with the culture and values of the organization.
Absolutely.
What's interesting to me is that area where, depending on people's energy and their personal profile and their own lived experience, they have different goggles and they will see the world very differently. So
absolutely,
one person describes it like this, and so that's something which you're talking about objective measurement. But what about how much do you think the sort of individual perspective and the different type of personalities play into how you?
I think it's valuable beyond real measurement, in the sense that what I mean by this is monocultures are rarely high performing cultures. Okay. In my experience. So if we have groupthink, if we're suffering from groupthink, if everyone's coming from the same worldview, same perspective, that's not saying we don't have the same values and vision, so if the values and visions are aligned, you can bring in people from lots of different experience bases. We as humans don't walk around with a manual that says, hey, this is how I see the world, and just so you know, I'm going to give you a copy so we can be really productive together. That's stuff we pick up in all of the nonverbals. It's stuff we pick up through experience around one another, but it's rarely very clearly articulated. And I think that's where what's traditionally been classified as soft skills, these understanding how to work with teams and people and things like that, have started to take on a new life in this generation. I think as the whole culture of leadership development has evolved over the last 25, 30 years, or even longer, 50 years. And you said something the other day, we were talking, and I absolutely love this statement. I've stolen it from you and used it vigorously over the last week, just so you know. But this you referred to them as higher order skills, and I absolutely love that phrase, because learning how to communicate and bring out the best in others is really the heartbeat of why I do what I do. I love being in the role I'm in because I love seeing people prosper in their various functions and roles. And I love seeing the dynamic contributions that unique people bring to the table. So I love diversity in the group of people. Okay, I love that diversity factor. Um, but the part that I really want to make sure we have alignment on is the core values that you mentioned earlier. If I know we're on the same page on the core values side, if I know we're on the same place on the mission, the outcomes that we're looking to achieve, then then it gives us the freedom to explore together to find the best options. And that exploration process isn't super zen and everyone just sitting at the top of a mountain kind of floating above the clouds and the idea just emerges. It's usually quite messy, actually, and it's a lot of interaction, engagement, and passionate advocacy for different viewpoints. And we need that. We need that, because I love seeing a group of really brilliant people who are passionately engaged on a subject tearing into how do we approach a challenge. And I don't mind the emotion, because the emotion that comes with that is usually a byproduct of investment. People care, and because they care, they're pouring themselves into it. The key to getting the value out of that is making sure that we understand how to separate self from idea. And so, like within my organization, we talk about a concept called donate and divorce, which is when we're in one of these kind of brainstorming scenarios, or we're in one of these problem solving scenarios, and you're giving ideas to the group, you give it to the group and you have to cut the emotional umbilical cord to the idea. Okay. So now the idea has to stand on its own merits. Okay. And that doesn't mean you don't advocate for your position, but you've got to be able to create some critical distance between yourself and the advocacy role. Because when people are looking at the idea and dissecting the idea, they're not dissecting you. Okay. And so what happens is sometimes people get too emotionally entwined with their own position and idea.
Position is the person.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so that critical distance we talk about, that is such a valuable tool to have in being able to have healthy conflict, but disengage from having it turn into those amygdala hijacks that I talked about at the beginning, where someone feels like they're going into fight, flight, or freeze mode because they're feeling the attack is on them. And that's not what's happening at all.
How does that look? Like if you were a business or you're developing a business, how do you actually implement some of these strategies, or what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Is it a meeting? Is it a survey? Is it a general, part of the induction? What does that look like?
No, it's a great question, because I know we hear talking heads all the time and they give lots of great theoretical ideas, but how does that look like in real life, right?
What do I do tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it begins with the very beginning of the relationship with that person on the team is having a clear social contract developed within your organization. So a clear social contract that lays out the rules about how do I want to be treated as an individual? How do we want to be treated as a group? How do we treat the people outside the organization? So just having sort of those clear rules of engagement, because in the absence of concrete rules, people make up their own. And they're going to
worse, actually, that I've discovered in organizations. What happens? They learn the bad stuff from the last person who did it. So like you talk about your whispers, that actually happen in organizations, because what happens, you think, where did you learn that? They go, well, somebody recruited 3 months before me told me that that's what they do. So you can magnify the mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. And any behavior unwanted within an organization, or even in any dynamic, when brought into the light and fully understood, loses its power. Okay. So if you have these sort of invisible behavior patterns that are happening within your organization, you're going, that is not the behavioral pattern I want to see. You really got to do the root cause analysis on it. Where are we either teaching it or tolerating it? So we're either teaching it implicitly, or we're teaching it tacitly within the organization just because it's allowed to exist. And people go, oh, okay, so that's the way we do things here. People are very quick on that. We're social animals. And so we pick up signals faster than anybody can even realize when we just see the way the nuance of the behavior. So as leaders, we model the behavior we're looking for, which means we can't be precious about all of our own ideas. I recently wrote an article about, being aware of hippos within your organization. That stands for highest paid person's opinion. Okay. and if the hippo is always winning, okay, then you are seriously undermining the potential of your organization, because you're not bringing out the best and the best ideas in your group. No one will share their best ideas because they know the hippo is always going to win. The highest paid person's opinion is always going to win. So that's a clear sign that drives disengagement. So it starts with a social contract. That social contract can't just be a document that's crafted by an executive in an office somewhere and sent out as a memo. That's not how it works. Okay, for it to be it's an involvement of saying, okay, these principles that I've talked about, this idea that conflict is a necessary part of creation. It's a necessary part of building together a better whatever it is we're focused on. And so in that, it's accepting the role of conflict as a useful tool, B, having clear social contracts about how we engage conflict. This is how we do conflict here. Okay. And we're encouraging it, but we're encouraging it in the right way. I say one of my roles as a chief operating officer is to curate talent. Okay. I am always, my head's on a swivel, always looking for brilliant people that I can bring in and add to my organization. And then once I get them into my organization, my job is to remove roadblocks from them achieving their goals and what they need to achieve here. But it's also to stir the pot, because now I've got really bright minds in the room. And so my job is not to be the smartest guy in the room. My job is put together the room of the smartest, most brilliant, most invested people I can get. And then I stir the pot intentionally, because I want the best things to surface. I want to get the dross off the top, and I really want to get down to the gold. And so for me, that is, sometimes playing the devil advocate, sometimes challenging the idea, even if I like the idea, sometimes challenging the idea just to make sure.
People, when you do that, Michael, do you tell people this is what I'm doing?
Oh, absolutely. I'm completely transparent that I'm going to do this. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a brave thing to do. I mean, our business started with me and an assistant. Yep. And we've grown into very rapidly into a successful business. There's now about 100 people involved, but you've managed teams and dealt with thousands of people, haven't you? In terms of what's the biggest number of people you've had to kind of manage or advise or coach in relation to?
So in our organization right now, the staff here, we're right around your size as far as internal staff, but then we have 25,000 independent reps in 9 countries. So we're interacting, and there's a even different challenge there, because it's a little bit what they call cat herding, because these are independent people. They're licensed to promote and use our products, but they're trying to do the best they can as an individual, and they're not aware of government regulations, other mandates and prohibitions and things like that they have to comply with, and the GDPR isn't a word in their day-to-day language, so they don't have to deal with a lot of the nonsense we deal with at a corporate level. That's just part of life in doing business, but we still have to get them to comply with those things, because we're held accountable if they don't.
Sure. They're in a way that, they're your shop face, aren't you? They're
100%.
Front, and they're representing. So in terms of culture and values and so on. So we learned, when we had just a few people around the room, we all shared a common culture. We didn't do any of this, profiling or psychometric tests. Whatever. We just did, as you say, we were very fortunate with the people that we had. We had great people, and many of them have come along with us. And as we grew, we had to make a real concerted effort to say, what are our values? Let's get everyone involved in those. Let's make sure that we live them, and we reward on them, and people live by them. And it's quite interesting. We've just done something now in the staff engagement, because we've got to a certain size and expanded rapidly. And there is a need, as you say, not to have the hippo voice dominate. And we've introduced something only recently, actually, by way of an anonymous staff engagement survey. Kind of take a litmus test of how everyone feels, and we think it's we want this to be the most fantastic place to work. We want it to be the best place to work in the world, and that's the vision, and that's what a lot of people will smile and say and I'm absolutely petrified, Michael, as to what people will say. Should I be worried?
Well, no, because only if you're afraid of truth. Okay, if you're afraid of truth and you're not willing to deal with truth, then don't do it. Okay, don't do it. Okay,
because we want to learn. That's isn't it?
Yeah. So to me, it's there's a wisdom scripture that says, "Better the wounds of a friend than the kisses of an enemy." Okay, and so to me, that to me embodies this idea of, I'd rather have a hard truth than a convenient lie. Okay, because I can deal with truth. Truth is like the solid ground under my feet. It's gravity. It's real. I can deal with it. If I'm selling myself a fantasy, then every decision I make moving forward from the point that I've committed to fantasy, okay, is an unstable decision. It is not based in reality. And so at some point, you're going to get hit with reality because not everyone's going to support your delusion. Okay. The market's not going to support your delusion. Your competitors won't support your delusion. Okay. So
one of the things that I think people crave is authenticity.
100%.
We are really, I think we're very, very focused on that. It's what we're promoting to other people, that you have to be authentic in what you do. I'm trying to do more, LinkedIn stuff that I write that's from the heart. I think we're in a world where there's so much that's AI generated and straight out the manual and stock things. And I think that humanity and authenticity is so important now in companies.
I think it's the new X factor. The people who get how to connect and relate authentically in organizational leadership, in one-on-one personal dynamics, and management and coaching dynamics. Like if you understand how to be real and connect in a real and meaningful way, well, that means you have to be tuned in your own core to what your values are and where you're coming from. And that's why I believe your terminology, higher order skills. I mean, frankly, I think that's a great title for a book, by the way. You should write that book. But
let's do it.
But it's such a fantastic idea of, there are these skills, and it's not demeaning the value of technical skill. That obviously we need that. I need a lawyer who's a good lawyer. I need a brain surgeon who's a brilliant brain surgeon. But the higher order skill, that I believe the brain surgeon who also has the human skills strength, the authenticity, the connection, will be infinitely more effective in their role than the one who doesn't. I think really
interesting. It's really interesting that you say that, and that's a key focus. And I think it is so important. I spent 30 years as a barrister. I'm still a qualified barrister and do one or two cases a year. But I've not put away my wig, but I've hung it up. And one of the things that I always train, young pupil barristers, trainee barristers, when they're I'm supervising them, is, they say, what's the most important thing when you go into court? And they say, preparedness, to have your arguments, have all your things in order. So before you get there, what's the most important thing? And not many people get it, but the people with the higher order skills do get it. And the answer actually is to have looked up the judge and know what makes them tick.
Yeah.
Before you because you could make whatever argument you want, but this might be a judge who likes dates, or it might be a judge who only likes brevity, or it might be a judge who needs it all spelled out for them. And it's fascinating that actually people come from years of legal training and they don't necessarily have the higher order skills to know who they're dealing with. And what they're talking about in terms of business is, okay, you can have the conversation, but have it in the right way, with the right people, on the right terms.
100%.
And the contract has to be there. And actually so much conflict comes out of the fact that people get that wrong. They go in with the wrong message, it's tone deaf, and they think they're doing a great job because on paper it looks fantastic.
Yeah. Well, it's something my mother used to say to me. She used to say to me, you could be 100% right about what you're saying and 100% wrong in how you delivered it.
And she was 100% right.
and so I've always gotten a lot of fascination out of that concept of to be factually accurate, but absolutely inappropriate in the delivery, the way that you went about it, communicated. So, and I think that's, if you tie it back to the conflict within culture dynamic that you've been, focused on here. If conflict is presented or delivered, or the culture tolerates toxicity in the approach to conflict, then the deleterious effect on the entire organization is unimaginable. I mean, because once trust goes, engagement goes, performance goes, everything else follows. We have a saying that the heart leaves the business before the money does. Okay. And so, because as a barrister, there's a lot of things you could have done with your career. I mean, there's so many different facets of the law you could have focused on. And you've gone into this area, which is particularly interesting to me because it's such a high emotional intelligence contact sport. You have to, it's a full contact sport. I mean, it's rugby if there ever was rugby. Okay. In that context, because two parties at odds, the need to find and mediate to resolution. That's requires a high. That's not like contract law where you're just sitting around just kind of reviewing docs, okay, or just arguing, intellectual property cases, okay.
Well, I did criminal law, so people did go to prison for quite a long time.
Yeah. That's also highly emotional for sure. But my point being though that to choose to go into that space means embracing the very human aspects of how people in the law interact with one another, and how do we address and deal with conflict. And that takes a certain kind of heart and a passion for humanity. And I think it would be very difficult to take that kind of role and also not be authentic and seriously values minded and grounded. And I think it would be hard to be very long-term successful in that function. Just as my observation of you and your organization is that requires a huge amount of emotional intelligence, but a heart for people at its core. And I think
right, kind of means a lot, Michael, coming from you. But I think that we're helping businesses resolve conflict, and we're helping train people in those higher order skills. And I think we feel so conscious that we've got to do it really, really well within our organization, because if we're not doing it, we can't be going out to the world. So we're so on this, which is why I think I'm so anxious to get it right. But I don't want to be the hippo.
Well, and that is. But you talked about that. There is a willingness to be vulnerable as a leader. That isn't a surrender of your authority or your function to lead and to determine direction and things like that, but it is a collaborative work that says, this isn't about me. It's bigger than me. I'm a part of the equation. I'm a steward of the leadership of this organization in this season, but businesses change hands, leadership changes, people retire, like organizational, the roles and the people in an organization over the long haul will evolve and change. And if we focus on a culture that embraces all the necessary components of creation to build something of value, then conflict will have a seat at the table, but it needs to be that healthy conflict. And it needs to start with, the willingness to hear the truth. And maybe not, it's the difference between, absolute, objective, universal truth and the truth of other people's experiences, and each of those things being, weighted in their contribution to the overall. So hopefully that made sense.
100%. And I think that it's interesting. We approach things from a position of learning and curiosity.
Yeah.
And I think there is an honesty in telling people, we may not get all this right all the time. We're interested to learn. We want to understand, and we're curious about other people's voices.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting to me is over the years, I think that lawyers start off with the view, never apologize, never admit any weakness, never say anything. But what I've really learned in business is when you're compassionate and authentic and you say, look, help me understand this because we may not have got it right. Let's try and work this out in a way that works for everybody. People don't see that as vulnerability or weakness. People see that as strength. Actually, they see humility as strength.
100%.
But the classic teaching in law is, don't be humble. Don't let them have anything because I want more.
Yeah, that's right. Inch and a mile, right? But I think it's so interesting because I picked up a phrase years ago, and I really don't know who I got it from. I wish I could because I'd love to give them the credit for it. But I heard someone say this, and they said, "I reserve the right to be wrong," and that just kind of hit me like a lightning bolt. As a younger man, given we were talking about personality types earlier, if you haven't been able to tell, I'm fairly assertive and driven and a goal objective oriented, and I have all those qualities. Yeah, and but what I didn't have was the understanding that there's sometimes value in being able to retreat off of a position. Like for me, it was like you take the ground and you hold it to your last dying cell. Like once you've staked your position, there is no retreat, no surrender. And that's a fairly immature worldview, admittedly. As I grew in leadership, I realized, I reserve the right to be wrong was one of my greatest tools in being able to help lead great people. Because when you look at I'm in a role in my life where I'm trying to emphasize my attention on leading leaders, leading people who are having a multiplicative effect across many people and organizations and structures. And so in that function and kind of studying what leadership looks like at that level, it's realizing that, I talked about stirring the pot earlier, I'll take a position, but I'm not going to be the first one to give the position in my team, because I want to draw out the best. And if I come in with the hippo, and the hippo usually walks in the room and says, all right, guys, let me tell you how it's going to be. And they just lay it on the table. And now it's really not a discussion about the idea. It's a discussion about how are you going to do what I've decided. And that's not the kind of high value order we're trying to achieve out of bringing out the best in our people. It also doesn't drive engagement, because one of the big things they talk about in HR studies now is the thing they're looking at is how do you access what they call discretionary effort? How do you access the best ideas? And you can't know if they've given you their best idea, okay? Because it sits between their right ear and their left ear, okay? And until it comes out of their mouth, you don't know it until you hear it. And so
discretionary effort is the effort that people go to beyond what they basically have to do for their role. So
absolutely.
You have their standard role, and then discretionary effort is the added value.
Absolutely.
What people are putting in. I suppose if people are not rewarded and encouraged and empowered, then they're not going to give any discretionary effort. It doesn't
at
exist.
all.
They just come in and do their job. We've seen businesses like that where people come in and do their job.
Yeah,
I think it's absolutely fascinating. But people really have to be part of the journey, don't they? They have to buy into the vision and the goal, and they have to feel empowered. And what's interesting to me, and I think you recognize this and articulate this so beautifully, that the senior people in an organization are sometimes not the best judge of how to deliver the message and when to deliver the message and what medium to use. You've got to empower other people to bring that up.
Yeah.
You told I just want to. I can't finish without you telling the story. There was a fascinating story you had that you shared with me about staff suggestions.
So
about the one I mean, about people were rewarded a certain amount of money for giving suggestions. At a company.
So I mean, I'm not sure which story specifically, because there's a lot of them, but
I think it was at a manufacturing company where people were given $25 or something to give a staff suggestion, and they didn't really think that people would be paying this, so they started with all sort of nonsense suggestions.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So they began this process of hey, we need to, because there's this interesting diagram chart, you can look it up on the internet, and it shows how much at the different tiers of the organization do they really understand the frontline challenges going on with the business. And it showed that at the very top tier of an organization, it's like they understand less than 4% of what's actually happening. And so because they're just so siloed, and especially as an organization starts to move to multi-country or very large nationwide operations, you just literally can't be in all these places. You can't stay, without mechanisms in place to get that feedback. And so they instituted this feedback mechanism. And again, all the first suggestions that came through were nonsense. They were just completely, people were just being joking and making, silly recommendations, things like that.
Because they were told they were going to get like $25 for each suggestion.
Yeah. And so they started paying out the suggestion fees, and people were shocked that they actually did it. Even though they were nonsense. Okay. And then coming back and as they continue to do that over the span of a month or so, people actually started to give them high value suggestions. Real stuff started to come through, and people saw, oh, they're serious about this. And this ties back to something I said just a minute ago, Adam, where you were saying, hey, should I be scared? Okay. About opening the gate to the input. And here's the thing. Had they not paid the suggestion fee, it would have built inside the organization cynicism.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the most deadly poison you can get within a culture. Okay. The moment people don't believe you and your intentions, we are now in real trouble as an organization. Okay. And so when you open up the doorway, that's why I tell people who are about to go into kind of the opening, hey, we're going to put in place, sometimes they call them pulse surveys. So we're going to take a weekly pulse survey or something like that of the organization. I say, awesome. But only do it if you, A, are really willing to hear what they have to say, B, you're going to follow through, and C, you're going to do it consistently.
Yes.
Okay. Because to start those kind of initiatives and ask people to be vulnerable, to ask people to take a risk and share, ask people to engage, and then they see, you don't respect it, you're not following through on it, you're not listening, and then it happens on some spotty, irregular basis. They just don't learn to trust it. And so,
Yeah, I
so
think that's good advice for all organizations. So do it when you're ready to do it, but only do it if you mean it,
yeah,
and do
and
something
you're
about
absolutely willing to walk the path, because if you don't, if you reverse back because the first round of feedback you get, was a lot of pent up frustration, for example, because if there's been no feedback mechanisms and then you open the door, very likely some of the people who've been sitting on something and have been boiling for a while inside of it, it might come out very emotionally. It may not be the most respectful or eloquently stated, but there's value in it. If you understand that there was a pocket of something festering there that was being unaddressed, and you gave them a valve to release that, but that if you shove the cork back in, it'll double down on the frustration. Okay.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so it is one of those things where it's like, it can be an amazing blessing to your organization from an uplift effect, cultural engagement, all those factors, but only done in the right way. It's the right action, but it needs to be done in the right way. Just like we were talking earlier about the right communication, but being delivered in the wrong way.
Absolutely.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, one of the things I've learned is actually you have to bring people with you, and you have to involve them in the process. And the way that people want things done may not be the way that we perceive. It's not necessarily the most efficient, not the quickest, not necessarily the most conventional, but there's a need to involve everybody.
Yeah, and the payoff is like the example of that company, where by the second month, some of the suggestions they got were saving them millions. I mean, millions in turnover impact, because they were willing to pay the 25 quid for the stupid ideas in the first couple of weeks. Okay. And so they got through you're not serious, so we're not serious, to, oh, wow, they are serious and they're putting their money where their mouth is, to, oh, okay, they actually want to hear me. And so I'm going to take that discretionary effort, that great idea, that impact that I could have, that I've been holding back on because I didn't feel engaged or safe to do it. And then, they release that to you, and it becomes something that can be complete game changers. So
Fantastic. And I think sometimes, I was going to say, sometimes there is a blessing in, as you say, the conflict. The conflict is seen as a very negative thing, but it comes to teach us something, and something we've got to then embrace. And I suppose there's people who just want to avoid it, and people who want to, really, organizations that believe in what they're doing and have the confidence to say, okay, we don't have all the answers. And as you say, the wonderful saying that I reserve the right to be wrong.
Reserve the right to be wrong.
That's absolutely fantastic.
Go on. Well, one other thing I would add on there is, and I would say this is the role for senior leaders. Your job is to make sure you're opening the doors for healthy conflict, and you're making space for all voices to be heard. And so if you've got you'll always have the more aggressive voices in meetings. You'll have the ones who speak up always, even when they're not asked. They're giving you their opinion all the time. And that's wonderful. I'm not in any way degrading that. But there is a lot of deep thinking, less extroverted, people on your team who are generally, they're deferring in their nature, but they are gold mines of insight. They are deep observers of people and behavior. And so as a leader, you want to say, hey, fantastic, Simon, love that. That's great. We've captured that input. Sarah, I really want to hear from you, because I know you've been sitting there. I can see that you're probably processing a lot. Help me hear your thoughts on this. Make the space for them. And as you start to learn to do that, you're actually also training your team to make space for each other. And that's a critical aspect of it as well. So I didn't want to lose that, because I think it's a part of closing the loop on that idea.
Really, really, really important practical feedback. Michael, it's been fantastic chatting to you. I feel like we could talk forever. I wish you every success with continuing to develop AquaSource, which is going from strength to strength. and look forward to you're based. You better tell us where you're based because it's getting dark here, and your day's only just starting.
So I'm in Central Texas. I'm about a few hours south of Dallas, and kind of positioned centrally between Austin and Houston, Texas. So,
well, I can tell you it was a fabulous day today. I hope your day goes as well as mine has been, and wish you every success in continuing to do everything you're doing and spreading some of this excellent wisdom, not only in AquaSource, but also to many other companies as well. Michael, thank you so much and look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. Bye for now. Good seeing you.